Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Shay coming back at y'all with another episode of the Emmaus proposition. What is really going on, man? How y'all feeling out there? Hope y'all doing good. Hope God is blessing y'all in whatever you endeavor. I hope you're enjoying it. I hope all your troubled times that God is making Himself known and manifest, and you can feel His actual presence. Hey, how y'all doing? Yo, I'm not like super nervous to talk about this conversation, right? Actually, I'm not nervous at all. But I know y'all can see from the description what we're gonna be talking about today. Um, I'm not. It's not that I'm nervous about it, man. It's that the conversation is so big, and it's so there's so many like wrinkles to it that I just don't know where to go with the conversation. I'm just at this point. I'm hitting start on record, and I'm gonna just kind of talk my way through it, man. Because actually, I have been talking about the topic of racism a lot lately, and not that I've been necessarily talking about it to other people. There's been a lot of self talk about it because I've been watching a lot of videos by a guy named Thomas Sowell. And man, if you guys haven't been privileged enough to hear the wisdom pour forth out of Thomas Sowell, man, you are missing out on life, man. And I know that growing up, he was not a household name for me, um, and that's honestly, it's been almost to my detriment, man. Like I feel like I've learned so much from him in the past few weeks that I feel underserved in my education. I feel underserved in the conversations that I've had in the past with people on the topic of racism. I've probably spoken out of ignorance more times than I care to admit, and not that I'm using this to correct those conversations. It just adds more wrinkles, man. It adds more wrinkles to the depth of this particular sin, because that's what racism is, right? Racism is not like it's not a new invention. It's not isolated to America. It's definitely not isolated between black folks and white folks. It's all over the place, man, and there's a demonic spirit behind it. And so, in the course of this conversation, there's probably going to be some times where uh, I'm just, I can see things both ways, and so I'm probably going to talk to it from both ways because I think that's what we're supposed to do as Christian people. I think we're supposed to come down on these issues not on one side or the other. We're actually supposed to come down on it on the side of God. It reminds me of the story when Joshua was, I think they were getting ready to siege Jericho, and the angel of the Lord was standing there. I forget if it was the angel or an angel of the Lord, but the angel was standing there, and Joshua was like, "Are you for us or against us? Are you for our enemies, or are you against, or are you for us?" And the angel was like, "I'm for God." And man, I would much rather be that than anything else. I don't want to come down on the topic of racism on the right side or the left side, conservative or liberal, Democrat or Republican. Like I don't need any of that mess, man. My citizenship is in heaven. And so as I think about these topics, as I go through them mentally, what I want to do is I want to come down where Christ would come down, and he would declare it with all his might that this is a sin. This is something that God's people should not be engaged in. This is something that um, God's people should be clinging to as if it's some kind of once we identify it, then we'll be free. If we can just get people to see our side of why this is this, then we can solve these problems. Nah, nah, that's not it at all. We come down on the side of God, and we make this declaration. Man, that's evil. There's a demonic spirit behind it, and the more we can call it out in all of its various forms, the better we can help the world get over it too. Because from what I've seen, what I saw in the last couple of years, like I don't say this with I'll say it boldly, but I'm gonna say it sadly too. Racism has infiltrated the church, man, in a demonic way, and there's people that are blind to it. There's people that won't admit it, and man, it's sad. It's sad. We're supposed to be the light on the hill. Christian people are supposed to be the ones leading the charge as far as what this looks like to be eradicated from our communities. It's supposed to be the Christians that are leading the way, and the Christians are just following suit with what everybody else is doing. So I'm gonna talk about it for a little while, man. Y'all can see where my head is at, and like we always do over here on the Emmaus proposition, man, we're gonna lead it back to Christ, man. And I'm sure some of you will be like, "How are we gonna lead racism back to Jesus?" And here's the thing: everything that we talk about on this show, right? It's either a type or anti-type of Christ, and so we gonna get there. We gonna talk about Jesus. Come, come what may, we gonna talk about Jesus, whether it's type or anti-type. But let me say it like this. So the other day, actually, it was yesterday. Yesterday, I was watching this video by Thomas Sowell, right, and he was talking about um, this group of people. I'm a butcher the story, man. I'll put the link to the video down in the description. I'll probably make like a little tag too for those of you who are on YouTube. Um, and you can go check it out yourself. But there was this town in it was around the Germanic region, somewhere in there, Czechoslovakia, kind of what we would know today, right? And the town, the people were called the Budweisers. I thought that part was pretty funny that they were called the Budweisers. And Thomas Sowell, he was making sure not to like equate it with the beer that we have today. They did make beer, but it was nothing like the beer that we have, the Budweiser we have today, right? Maybe I'll do an episode one day on beer. Yeah, I'll think that one through. Because to the glory of God, man, we should probably talk about the consumption of alcohol a little bit. Anyway, um, it was this town. It was probably more like a city state, and they were called the Budweisers. But the town was made up of Germans and Czechs, right? And so they're there and they're living together, and you know Germans and Czechoslovakians, like they don't speak the same language. Like those are two different languages, but they were able to live in this town in peace and harmony for a long time. But the reason they were able to live in such peace and harmony is because they identified themselves as the Budweisers, right? But as it was over time, some tensions started happening because the Germans ended up being like um, uh, the more educated. They had more of the resources, things like that. And leaders started coming up from the Czech community that were like, we need to be able to look out for the Czechs. And so they started running. They started campaigning on that type of messaging, like we are Czechoslovakians first before we're Budweiser. So they and maybe even, and I'm adding conjecture to this story. Maybe they had a hyphenated name of themselves, right? So we're the Czech Budweisers. Um, just so there's like identification. So like what was happening was they didn't have a way to like cling to any identity. They felt like those folks over there have more than we do, so we need to create our own identity so we can have this sense of pride, and that sense of pride will help us excel and exceed and rise up to the point where those other people were, right? Actually, what ended up happening was, as time went on, and the Czechs were like, they were doing all this stuff, the Germans started saying, well, if you guys are going to be treating us like this, then we're just going to identify as Germans first. And so they probably took on like a hyphenated, we're German Budweisers. That one's actually funny. We're German Budweisers. And man, fast forward, this was all before Nazi Germany. Nazi Germany hits, and the Czechs end up being wiped out of the Budweisers. And now, like, now there is no more Budweiser. Now it's all like Germany. Now it's all Czechoslovakia. Like the division happened. The damage was done. And I was listening to that story, and man, it resonated with me because I'm like, I see some of that division happening today. Like I can see that we're so focused on making these divisions between ourselves. Like we almost make these, they're almost like artificial divisions between ourselves. And I know the argument, right? Because I've had conversations with like family members, I've had this conversation with friends, I've had this conversation with coworkers, with people in my community and stuff like that. And they'll say stuff like, we have to know our history in order to thrive. Like we can't just forget about all the pains of the past and all the damage that was done to us. And Thomas Sowell makes this point in this video. He says maybe some things that were in the past just need to be left in the past. Like there's no way to continue to strive toward unity if we're all divided on these little fault lines. And so I watched another video where this young dude was going, he was interviewing people, and he was a black dude, and he was interviewing other black students. And they were going back and forth because the young guy he was a conservative, and usually like this is in my view, this is one of those racist things in the black community. Like a black conservative is like is the bane of existence for a lot of folks in the black community. And I don't know why. I don't know. I've never understood that. But this young dude, he was talking to the crowd, and he was telling them, they were like, they were talking about racial identity, and he was like, well, I'm not African American. I've never been to Africa. My family lineage traces back 8 generations, and they all came from America. I have white folks in my background. I've got native folks in my background. I've got some Latino in my background. He was a black dude, but he's like the largest portion of my DNA background is Europe. There's a lot of different micro places in Africa that probably add up more percentage wise more than European, which is why he was probably my complexion or so. But he was like, "What? So which one do I identify with? Which one do I claim? Why are you calling me African American when I've never been there?" And for a lot of folks, they feel that way. Like why would I claim something that's not mine? That I have like a fullness of geographical locations in my DNA. Why am I clinging to this one? And the names start. And for anybody that says black folks can't be racist, I do not know which point of reality that you're attached to. Uh, sin has no uh, it has no DNA effect. Racism is a sin. Racism, anybody can participate in. I know plenty of black folks who talk trash about Asian folks. I know plenty of black folks that talk trash about white folks, and they say the most despicable, horrible things. I know black folks that talk trash about other black folks just because they're a different complexion or they come from a different part of the world. Like I know I know from history that Chinese people and Japanese people hate each other. I We would say they're both Asian and not understand the cultural nuances of that geographical part of the world. It's racism and it's nasty and it's ugly. But for some reason, um, we get it caught up here in the States, especially black folks. They'll say stuff like black folks can't be racist. And then white folks will say stuff like, I'm not racist. I can't be. I've got 5 black friends. And black folks will say, I can't be racist. I got 5 white friends. And nobody's willing to call it what it is, and it continues to hide. So this young dude that's doing this interview, right? He's like, I'm not. I wouldn't consider myself African American. If you call me anything, I'd probably be American. If you need to qualify that, I'm a Black American, and all the names come out, right? You're a coon, you're a sellout, you're Uncle Tom, you're this name, you're that name, you're Oreo. You got all kind of stuff, right? And it's I don't get it, man. I don't get that part of it. Um why the black community is so against having people that have a different frame of mind, different solutions to the same problems. Why they demonize them so hard. I don't get that, man. It's changing. I'll say that. Like, it's changing. Like, there's more and more black conservatives that are coming around. And it's crazy because, like, as far as the conservative side, um, value wise, I would say black folks more align with conservative values than they do liberal values. We cherish our families. We go to church. We believe in God. We're not down to just live a wild life. Like, we got pride. At least we used to, man. Like, I'm watching some stuff on YouTube, TikTok, and all kind of stuff, and man, I don't know. People, I think the world is just wild now. But that's probably a different sin problem. We'll go back to this racism thing, and we can't get it together, right? So all that stuff it happens in the black community, and I'm a part of that, right? And so black communities' thought about racism is that it disenfranchised black people so much. The effect was so devastating that it's the equivalent of starting a race 100 meters behind, and it's probably going to take generations to undo the damage that was done over time by leadership in this country, right? So you had stuff like slave ships with thousands of people coming over on slave ships. You had once they were here being sold off as property, they were treated as like livestock. And you can go someplace, like there's some places in the South, man, where they still got signs up, where they still got, like, you can see where there was like auction blocks. This stuff is not it's not that far in history. It's really not. Like, I know we like to think that that was so long ago. Man, at best, we're probably 2, 3 generations removed. It's not that far. It's not that far in our past for us to treat it as if it's not a thing. You know what I mean? It's back there, and it was ugly and it was nasty. They were treated like cattle. Um, their homes were ripped apart as families were sold to this plantation or sold to that plantation. And um, after all that ordeal, right? After the Emancipation Proclamation was signed and black folks are free, you had this Reconstruction period where they're starting to thrive again, where businesses are starting to go up, households are being reunited, the family is intact. Then you get stuff like Jim Crow laws that come along. that just dig in, right? You got the rise of the Ku Klux Klan, that as places like Black Wall Street are trying to be established. Like there was like how we have like Little Tokyo, or we have like Little Italy in some of these big cities and stuff like that. There was places in the country where it was like it was a black stock market. Like black folks had their own, and the Klan came through. Like you could look this up as historical things. Like Tulsa, Oklahoma, the Klan came through Black Wall Street, burnt it all to the ground. So all of the financial opportunities, all of the opportunities for education, all of the opportunities for leadership, similarly burned to the ground, like during those times. And so it seems like every time black folks try to establish themselves to make their own, in the same way that like when Jewish families and whole communities would come to the states, and they would just supplant themselves like in these cities, and they would just build their own, and people left them alone. Irish did the same thing, and the Germans did the same thing. Like there's a in Columbus, Ohio. You go downtown Columbus, Ohio, and there's Germantown right there in the middle of Columbus, Ohio. Man, they still got like cobble streets. Well, I ain't been back to Ohio in a long time, but you could tell like there was German communities that came and got their resources together and built. You know what I'm saying? Like they were able to build. Every time black folks would try to do it, man, it would burn to the ground intentionally. Like there was some intentional stuff that happened. Um, and then if you didn't have these Jim Crow laws, you had like these little subversive things like redlining of communities that kept like it kept the economic opportunities squashed. And so there was never really a time during that time that there was, yes, I mean there was definitely opportunities for people like during this time, like also like all the HBCUs was starting to come out, the historically black colleges. For those of you who don't know what an HBCU is, all the historically black colleges were coming up. They're starting to be established. Yeah, people like Booker T. Washington that was leading the way. Like, here's what it looks like to come out of slavery and go get your education. And you don't have to let this stuff hold you down. And but people were against it. And after that Reconstruction period, you go into the Civil Rights period, and man, you look at the pictures as people are trying to fight for just basic civil rights, like the right to vote, the right to go into a restaurant, the right to like sit on a bus. They're trying to do all these things, and there's like literal people like saying, "No, you cannot, you will not, under threat of violence, arrest, having dogs sick on you, right? Like having the fire department come out and hose you off the streets, like your grime that they're trying to clean off the streets, beaten, stuff like Emmett Till, falsely accused of just whistling at a white woman, and they beat him like, hmm. There's all of that stuff, right? All that stuff happens during the civil rights period. Finally, civil rights is passed, and people say, "Yay!" And time goes on. Things aren't really getting better because um, people are moved out of the South into the northern states, and they put them up in project housing. And then once they put them up in project housing, you got people like Margaret Sanger that comes along and says, well, we can't just let those degenerates repopulate. We need to euthanize them. And so she sets up a bunch of Planned Parenthoods. It probably wasn't Planned Parenthood back then. But she sets up a system where, like, let's kill these babies off. We can't let them outpace the master white race, right? That was Margaret Sanger's thing. I don't know. Anyway, all that stuff is happening in the hood, and if that wasn't bad enough, um, in the '80s you had crack being introduced into the hood, and The CIA went on record that said they did that they instituted a program where they intentionally placed those narcotics in the hood, and then the '90s come along and they issued 3 strike laws, right? And so now, as if crack wasn't damaging enough, then you had um, these 3 strike laws that you got people hooked to this thing, and then told them that if they distributed and marketed it, that you were going to put them in jail for it, amongst other things, right? So there was with the rise of drugs comes a rise in poverty. With the rise in poverty comes a rise in crime. When you have crime, you tear up your neighborhoods, and so it's been a mess. It was a mess. It was a mess throughout the '90s. There's still people in jail right now that got convicted of some of that stuff in the '90s. Um, and then we hit the 2000s, and I know it seems like it's been so long ago. It has not, man. It hasn't been so long ago. Not when, like, the whole time that Black folks were going through all this stuff, there were other communities that were thriving. So you had Asian communities thriving, and I know Asian folks went through terrible stuff after World War II. Like, it wasn't just like Japanese people. If you even looked Asian, they would throw you in some kind of internment camp. They were hunting down Asians after World War II. They were brutalizing them. I'm not saying other communities haven't had their thing. And I even got into Native American, Joe. This racism thing is deep. And that's Native. I'm not even getting to Irish folks. What happened to Irish folks when they tried to come here, and the way they were treated? Racism is brutal. It's brutal and it's nasty. I'm not giving green light to any suffering of any kind. Um, Black folks have been through some stuff, man. And so the community's thought is, why are we not able to call out the injustices that have happened without y'all coming to say, uh, what you experienced is in the past and it shouldn't have an effect on you right now? Why are you able to say it? Why are you able to take trauma and just pass over it as if it never happened? And yo, I get it. I get it. I get that side of it. I promise I do. But I get the other side of it too. At what point do we take what happened in the past, and I'm thinking through that video with Thomas Sowell, right? Where he's saying, like, the more that people identified as a hyphenated thing, the less they were able to identify of the thing that unified them. When is the past gonna stop being the thing that's an excuse? And the reason I'm saying it like that is because, man, I'm looking at our culture, right? I'm looking at, like, Black culture, like hip hop culture, right? It's glorifying everything except who God wants us to be. It's glorifying everything except who God wants us to be. God doesn't want us to be hopping in and out of bed with everybody. He doesn't want young women of any race or creed. He doesn't want anybody to be an extension of a mattress. Nobody. He doesn't want young men hopping from bed to bed like they a jumping jack. He doesn't want that for any of us. Definitely doesn't want it from a people who the one of the primary things that got them out of slavery was them clinging to the love of Christ. He definitely doesn't want it for them. Definitely doesn't want a community that says we are for God and then turn around, spit in God's face, and live in a way that's lewd, and it's glorifying, um, just hedonist living, just living for self. I'm gonna get this bag. I'm gonna get this money. I don't need no man. Um, all of it comes from a place where it's still dealing with the trauma of these racial relations. But at what point do we say enough is enough, yo? I can't continue to give you this excuse. Eventually, you're going to have to start living in a way that glorifies God again. God has to call his people back. And his people have to say, as for me and my house, we will follow the Lord. There has to be that time. Otherwise, we're just condemning ourselves to death, man. In the example of the Czechs and the Germans, they're no longer a thing. Nobody hears about the city state of Budweiser anymore. Is that what we're after? Are we after just the total collapse of the whole thing? Do we forget that the place we live in, though it wasn't instituted immediately, has in its founding documents inalienable rights given to people by God: life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. Have we forgotten that this is the way that the place is from the very jump? It's not in our best interest to be hyphenated people. It's in our best interest to cling to the thing that's right now and make it better from this point forward. That's the only way, man. And man, this has political implications. This has theological implications. So it's deep and it's wrinkled, and there's all kind of things around it, right? And man, trying to talk to people about racism it's so emotionally charged, man. There's not a lot of facts that are being given, and so people will give anecdotal evidences and say, "Look, I've seen 3, 4 people this week getting pulled over by the cops, and all of them got treated wrong." And they'll say, "Look at these videos. These people must be racist. Matter of fact, this whole country hates us, and they have targets out for us. We've got a bullseye. Every time I walk out the door, I feel like I got a bullseye on my forehead." I'm like, that's anecdotal. That's not fact. The fact is, there's a lot of times, and this is where I'm gonna make people mad. This is where the whole racism thing, um, where I start to deviate from the popular black folk opinion, right? A lot of it is our fault. A lot of times, like we wonder why so many black folks are in jail. It's because they're actually committing crimes. People who don't commit crimes don't end up in jail. Granted, I'll grant you this: there are some people that were at the wrong place at the wrong time. I'm thinking of Jack Johnson, sat up in jail forever based off a false claim. I'm not talking about those. Those are onesie twosies. But as stats start to get thrown around, black folks are what, 13% of the population, but make up over 60% of prison systems. And the question is, well, how did they get there? And if your response to that question is, well, the country hates them, I that can't that can't be it. If we're talking anecdotal, right? If we're talking just um, observations of what we can see, I've never seen anybody wind up in jail for no reason. Everybody I know that has been to jail has got caught up in the game. Everybody, everybody I know has got caught up in the game, and whether it's the hustle game, or they just went balling and they just went forward, and they out there like robbing folks, or you know but that's like black folks over there, right? Like I the white dudes that I know that went to jail, same thing. Like they out there, they out in the streets banging. They rolling with motorcycle gangs and all kind of stuff, man. The Asian dudes that I know, they out there banging. They playing the game. And I had a sergeant one time. He told me, you play stupid games, you get stupid prizes. And so yeah, if you playing around playing stupid games out in the streets, even if yo, even if that's the only opportunity you have in life, even if like this is the only way that you can. I think it was Biggie that was like, either you slang and crack rock or you got a wicked jump shot. For Biggie, that was the two ways out of the hood. That was the only two ways. And so if you ain't got a wicked jump shot, Biggie was like, y'all out there, y'all hustling that crack. But you got to understand, like, when you hustle that crack, there's ramifications for it, right? Even if it was introduced by the CIA into, even if somebody else placed it in your neighborhood, you participating in it, you go and get caught up one way or another. Everybody who enters the dope game knows that. One day it's gonna catch up to you. Ain't nobody. I don't know if anybody that's went to dope games that came out clean. I'm sure there's some out there, but those are the challenges, right? Those are a lot of challenges. And on the other side of that conversation, right? People don't. So black folks will say y'all don't care, and you're trying to hold us down. On the other side, folks are saying actually we we're not trying to hold you down. We don't want crime in our neighborhoods. This is what they're saying. This is what I've heard. This is what I've observed. Right? They're like, we don't want that type of life around our kids. We came out here. A lot of folks left the inner city. They go out to the burbs, and the reason they go out there is not because of like white flight. I heard um, Michelle Obama say that one time. She was like, when I moved into the neighborhood, all the white folks left, and she called it white flight. And I guess if you want to frame it that way, you can. I mean, it's freedom of speech, right? You can do what you want to do. I think more of the reason why they left was like, we want to raise our family with these set of values, and those neighborhoods have a different set of values from what we want to raise our kids with. And so we're moving. And and it's fair. I know the black folks would say, we want to raise our families with those same values, but we don't have the resources to move where you're moving. So are you just going to leave us here to suffer and you not care about us anymore? So there's all that stuff, right? And I know I'm mostly just talking black and white, and because I think America's racism problem is a black and white thing, and I think if black folks and white folks can start to get some traction on its de-evolution, I think some of the other communities and some of the other racial problems we have will start to follow suit. I think like the chasm that exists between black folks and white folks is so deep, man. It's so hurtful that it has rippled out nationwide. Um, and so white folks are like, no, we don't want to live there. We want space. Um, we have the resources, so we're going to go. And black folks see that and they get mad, and then they see the black folks that have the resources to move and they leave and they get mad at them, and then the anger just kind of circles around and everybody's mad at each other and they're calling each other names, and the cycle continues. Um, so yeah, that's just one aspect of all this, man, and it's so deep. Like black folks hating other black folks. Like I remember Spike Lee put out that movie, School Days. If y'all never saw School Days, I think they were about at a historically black college. I'm pretty sure they were actually. I don't know if they ever named which one. It's been a long time since I've seen that movie. But it was black folks against black folks, because you had the light skins against the dark skins. And at the end of the movie, Spike Lee, because he's one of the characters in the movie. Actually, it's Lawrence Fishburne. It's Lawrence Fishburne. It's not Spike Lee. Lawrence Fishburne, for the last like 2-3 minutes of the movies, just starts screaming, "Wake up! Wake up!" Like he just screams it over and over. He's trying to scream it out to like everybody on campus. Wake up to what's happening. And like this self hate thing of your own community, it's not working, and it's deep, man. It all the way back to like slavery when uh, slave masters would bring certain black folks inside the home. You had this division, and they would say, "Oh, those the house ones, and these the field ones," not knowing that the house ones is inside getting raped, pillaged. The field ones just know they ain't in the house enjoying not being in the field. Like they still outside sweating. Those ones in there ain't sweating. They must have it better. But inside the house, there's psychological trauma that's happening, and people being raped and oh my gosh. Not to say they weren't raped out in the field. Like I'm not saying any of that, man. But it's none of it was good. None of it was good, and it continues on to this day. Like I hear I hear the way people talk about each other based on their race. It's like this is crazy. This is wild. So I don't know, man. It's deep. It's really deep. And on one side, it's on the black folks side, like they it's like there's no way to get past it. Like the damage is it's so deep. It's like this soul hurt that has been carried on throughout the generations, and it's not always intentional, man, because sometimes stuff will pop up that we're like, hey, this is this warning, these things might happen. Like one of the first driving lessons I got when I started driving in South Carolina was, don't you pull over on one of these dark South Carolina roads. You put on your hazard lights, you go to the next populated area, you drive like 10, 15 miles an hour, and you get somewhere safe before you pull over. Because people were disappearing back in those South Carolina woods. And so that was like one of my first driving lessons. And so that kind of stuff, like it continues, right? But then I get out in the world, I come to a place where it's mostly white. Like Reno, Nevada is mostly white. Is heavily white. It's heavily white. It's not monochromatic, but it's definitely it's got some hue to it. Oh gosh. Come to a place like this, and people regularly are like, "Man, we love you. How you doing? What can we do for you? When can we hang out? When can we do lunch? Tell me what you think about this situation. Give me your knowledge about that." And just affirming my personhood. So like growing up in a place where like getting called the N word to my face and having to fight uh, because of racism, right? Like growing up in a scenario like that, and then leaving that scenario and coming to a place where it's like it's not that. Not to say that I haven't experienced it. So like this is the bad part. This is another bad part about racism, right? It's the people that say, "Well, since I've never experienced it, it must not exist." And that's what's happening in the church. In the church, it's looking like um, our church can't be racist. Look, there's a black dude over there, and for a long time in the churches that I've attended, I was that dude that they were pointing at. Um, and the problem is when you start saying stuff that is that's against their political positioning, man, that ugly head of racism starts to pop its head out, and it's not. It doesn't look like the Ku Klux Klan at that point. It looks like, how dare you? I thought you were a different type of black dude. I thought you were on our side. I thought you were this. I thought you were that. I thought you leaned this way politically. Look at all these other black people that are leaning this way politically. How come you don't follow them? Don't be like those black folks over there. Don't argue for their cause. Oh my gosh. And so it's there, and it's infiltrated the church. Conversely, it's infiltrated the church in the black church, because the black church is saying, don't trust them white folks. Let's segregate ourselves from them intentionally, as if Dr. King didn't die to eradicate that stuff. We go back and we're de-evolving on segregation as Looney Tunes, man. Like, people died trying to get rid of the stuff that we're trying to go back into. Like, there's a saying, and I'm sure a lot of people have heard it, that says those who don't know their history are doomed to repeat it. And that's not just knowing what happened. That's definitely not like clinging to it as if it's going to provide some kind of rescue. But if you don't know the implications of what happened that led people up to in their decision making processes that got them to the point where they had to segregate, or they had to make these choices and then they didn't work out, and now like entire communities suffered in the process. Like, if you don't know like the timeline of why things ended up the way they did, then you're doomed to repeat it. And I think that's what's happening right now. I think we're de-evolving. It's and it's across the board, and the black community is going to suffer, white community is going to suffer, every other community, because those two can't get right, are going to continue to suffer. The church is so far gone, she ain't going to step in because she's so worried about her political ties that she ain't going to know where to come down. Like, you got white folks out here that are clinging to the Republican Party as if Jesus was a Republican. You got black folks clinging to the Democratic Party as if Jesus would have been a Democrat. Jesus would have blew up both systems. He wouldn't have been a part of either one. He would have called both and said, both of you are sinners. And now that I'm exposed you, now I'm pissy. And you're in the hands of an angry God. Jesus wouldn't have played these games, man. He wouldn't have. Like, I listened to his story as he's talking about the Good Samaritan. And if you look at that story, man, it is chock full of what racial conciliation looks like in the kingdom of God. It's not a place uh, where it's like high school, where you got like the jocks over here, you got the nerd kids over here, you got the chess squad going over there. It's heaven ain't gonna be like that. If you look at Revelation 7, it's every tribe, tongue, and nation sitting around the throne, shouting out glory to God and to the Lamb. There's no black section, a white section, an Asian section, Laos section, Brazilian section. It ain't all that. All of us crying out in one voice in all of our different languages and nuances and everything. We're crying out as of one voice, glory to God and to the Lamb. That's what that's what this thing looks like in the kingdom of God, right? And so Jesus is telling this story of the Good Samaritan, and he's telling them the law says to love your neighbors yourself. Y'all trying to be all fancy and trying to segregate who you say your neighbor is. Black folks do that. White folks do that. Asian, Irish, Scottish, Africans. Everybody does that. Everybody tries to, Muslims do that. Everybody tries to determine, like, these are my neighbors. So when God says love your neighbor yourself, I'm just going to love these people. And God's like, I don't play that game. And so he tells the story of the Good Samaritan. The Jews and the Samaritans, they hated each other. They got beef. Forget Tupac and Biggie. Mos Def came out with this song called What's Beef. I think it was called What's Beef. Um, they had beef. They had real beef. And Jesus was like, the Samaritan in this story is actually going to be the hero, not my kinsman. And they were pissy, man. They were mad. They were mad. They were like, how dare you? Frustrated. Jesus frustrated everybody on both sides. He frustrated the sinners because he was like, go and sin no more. I'm sure people heard that and they were like, oh, what do you mean? He looked at the Pharisees, the super holy crowd. He was like, y'all are whitewashed tombs. You look great on the outside, and you're like a maggot infested corpse on the inside. Jesus had beef with them both. God is not happy at sin. He loves a repentant heart, a contrite heart, a heart that says, man, I'm messed up. I need Jesus. And so as he's walking on this road to Emmaus and he's explaining to his disciples, remember that story I told about the Good Samaritan? Don't go around hating people. Don't go around trying to distinguish yourself as we're the Jews and everybody else is the Gentiles, and so we're called to hate them. The promise that God gave to Abraham was to bring all those people together. And we see the ultimate fulfillment of that in the book of Revelation. And so as Peter is sitting on top of a roof in the book of Acts, and a sheet comes down out of heaven, and man, it's got bacon on that joint, it's got pork chops, it's got some egg, some ham hocks, it's probably got some crab. What else it got? It's got all kind of stuff, right? All this stuff that the Jews distinguish themselves by what they eat. And Peter was like, I don't eat that. I don't eat that kind of stuff. Matter of fact, your law tells me not to eat that stuff. Why are you trying to get me to eat that stuff? Because Jesus, as the sheet is floating down, he's like, take it up and eat it. And Peter's like, I ain't doing that. I am holy, man. I ain't doing that. I'm set apart. You set me apart. I'm a Jew, dagnabbit. And all that other stuff is dirty. And Jesus says, don't call something unclean that I've called clean. And as Peter is hearing that, wild dream, by the way. I like bacon, but if I dreamt about bacon, that's a whole nother love of bacon, right? I love sushi, y'all. That's my if you want to take me out to lunch or something like that, we go into sushi, right? I love sushi. But if I start dreaming about it, we got other stuff. Peter's dreaming about this whole picnic blanket of all these foods he's not supposed to have. And if the story stopped there, it would be comical. But the next scene, this dude comes up and says, "Hey, these white folks up the road, these Italians probably wouldn't consider themselves white folks, but black folks just kind of group everybody European into one white folks boat. Anyway, there's these folks up the road, let's say they're Italian, that want to hear the gospel. Peter's like, I'm a Jew. I'm not even allowed to go in their house. That would make me unclean. Goes in the house. They receive the Spirit of God. They're in the family of faith. They're worshiping with Peter in the presence of God right now. And so for some reason, maybe it's this demonic presence thing. Maybe America is oppressed with this demon of segregation. They just cannot get past it, man. Like we're dedicated. Seems like we're dedicated, charged, zealous to keep ourselves separate from one another. We love it for some reason, and we make excuses for it. When this church wants to worship with this church, or if somebody brings that up, they'll say stuff like, "But they worship different than we do. We got the same theology. We would hold to the same doctrine, but I don't know. I don't know if I want to sit up under that style of preaching. I don't know if I want to sit under that style of music. So I'm just going to stay over here." We have entire communities that are like, I'm not going to go to that community. They smell different. I can't mess with them. They act different. They hate me. They hate me over there. So I'm not gonna go confirm that. I'm just going to stick with this narrative that the media is telling me, that those folks hate me, that they that they want to kill my children. And man, it's evil, man. There's demonic presences that are pushing people apart from one another, and we just buy into it instead of checking in with God and saying, "Hey, I struggle with this sin, and God, I need you to undo it. I need you to reveal it to me. I need you to heal me from it. I need you to place situations in front of me that are going to be uncomfortable for me, but I know are to your glory." We don't have prayers like that. But how in the world? So as Jesus is doing his high priestly prayer, right? And he says, all the ones you gave to me, I'm giving back to you. And I pray for them. I'm praying that as they continue in this life, that they love one another. Like you and I love one another. I want them to love one another like you and I love one another. How in the world are we going to do that if we continue to play with this sin as if it's not there? Because black folks won't admit that they're racist, and most white folks won't say that they're racist. It's those extreme ones that we probably need to rid of society, that are like, yeah, we're racist and we're proud of it. We need to brush them aside. We need to move them along. If they can't get with the program, we need to move them out of here. But it's everybody else that won't just admit it, that they have this thing. They won't search their souls enough. Like when they see people laying out dead in the middle of the street, it doesn't bother them. Or if they see them laying dead out in the middle of the street, they'll go do a march, but they don't care about all the other families that were just victimized by this person. See how it's deep, man. Like it's so many conversations, and if we can't even admit that it's there, we're never going to get to the bottom of it. So this is probably going to be part one of this whole racist conversation, man. I want to get somebody else on and just have it out, man. So I was shout out to my mom. Mom, I love you. I was talking to my mom yesterday about this subject because we see things differently politically, right? Like we're just on opposite ends of the spectrum. And she's like, I'm just praying for you because it's too bad that you don't see it like I see it. And I'm like, Mom, I'm praying for you because it's too bad that you don't see it how I see it. And so, but in the midst of that conversation, understanding is happening and love is happening, and there's nothing wrong with disagreeing with one another. Like we still love each other. And why can't we have that? Why can't we have it anymore? We could just fight it out verbally and then still be friends on the other side. How have we come down to the point where words are violence? That's a crazy thing right now. You can't even say stuff anymore. I can't tell you I disagree with you. I probably don't agree with a lot of y'all on a lot of different stuff. And if I can't tell you, my goodness, like what how are we gonna do this thing, man? Are we just supposed to shut up about everything we disagree with? Sooner or later we ain't gonna have nothing to talk about. This is wild, man. I got friends that won't talk to me anymore. I got a church that essentially was like, we don't want you as our pastor anymore because you don't see things the way we do. I got I got people who mean well on both sides. They're just off, and they don't have a kingdom perspective in it, and they don't see it. Racism is actually it's an anti-Imago day. We The Imago day is that we're created in the image of God. Racism actually comes through and it says, um, you're not created in the image of God. You're actually less than. Not only not only does it say to some group of people you're less than, it turns to other people and said you should treat those people as if they're superior to you and you're inferior to them. It's a That's another form of racism. If you go look at the textbook definition of it, it says any attitude that has this idea that someone is either superior or inferior to another human being. That's anti-Imago Dei. We're all created in the image of God. When Jesus is talking to his disciples, I'm sure he pointed to the creation of Adam and Eve when God told them to be fruitful and multiply, to spread out over the earth. I'm sure when he pointed to the story of Babel and said, "Look, they instead of them going and spreading out to the ends of the earth, they're trying to stay right here at Babel, and they're trying to overthrow God and His reign." I'm sure he explained to them that. I'm sure he explained to them, like, the reason why we confused this languages was actually to my glory, so that they can fulfill what I told them to do. And then I can write Revelation, and I can look out on a sea of the people who are screaming out how much they love me. And I can look back at each and every one of them and tell them I love them too. I'm sure he said that. I'm sure he was explaining that to them, man. And this whole racism thing, it's keeping us divided from ultimately fulfilling what God has for us. And we won't get right. And we keep letting these crazy media sources keep telling us that these folks are racist and that dude is racist and he hates you. He wants the best for you. He's coming to murder your children. And nobody is pointing out that that's a sin. Jesus died to wash away sin. Doesn't matter if the person had a racist background or not. He's cleansed and washed in the blood of Christ. And if he's not cleansed and washed in the blood of Christ, or she's not cleansed and washed in the blood of Christ, then we need to tell them about Christ. If we can't tell them about Christ, we need to tell the next generations about Christ. We can't go around trying to solve this problem by legislation, by these politicians that don't care about the people that are down here, because they're not pushing Christ. They're pushing more government. They're setting up the government as a savior. They're setting up woke ideology as a savior. They're setting up critical race theory as a savior. They're terrible saviors. We got one savior. It's Christ. We have to get it right, man. Otherwise, we're failing and we're losing. We're not being the light on the hill. We're not representing Christ as ambassadors in this world. God is not pleased, man. God will not be mocked by our continual letting these sources of so-called news continue to keep us separated. We need Jesus to come through and wreck shop. And if we're not calling on the Lord to come heal these things, not to come and change these people's minds, but to make ourselves holy, so that God can fish out all the crud that's inside of us. And then once he fishes it out inside of us and we take the big old tree that's sticking out of our eye, then we can see clearly to see what's going on with the person over there that we're supposed to love. And talk to them about their sawdust. Because we got it worse than they do. It starts with us. It starts with the house of God. Jesus, help us. We need help, man. This thing is deep. I could probably go on. Like I said, I want to get somebody else on to talk about it. I started to say I was having a conversation with my mom about it, and we were doing a good back and forth, man. Like when we do talk about deep stuff, not that we too often like change each other's minds, but man, we sharpen each other and we point each other to Christ in the midst of it all. And that's what we're supposed to do. It's okay that we have it out, as long as we're pointing each other to Christ. Because on this road to Emmaus, that's how we do it, baby. Hope y'all had a good time. So much more to say, man. Maybe I'll get somebody else on to talk about it. Let me know if y'all got some disagreements. I'm sure there's plenty of places to disagree with me, and I'm okay with that. Hit me up. Let me know. I'm down. We can do that. If you want to come on the show, open invite, man. If you want to come on the show, drop a subject, whatever subject you want, man. We could talk about it, because ultimately, like y'all know what we do on this road to Emmaus, man. Everything. I mean everything. Everything in all creation points its way back to Christ. And on this particular subject, racism is anti-Imago Day. It's actually against what Christ has set up. It's against Jesus himself. We are sinning against God. Black folks and white folks are sinning against God by participating in it, whether it's through a superiority or an inferiority. We're participating in it. God is not pleased, man. Let's get it. Let's get after it. Let's rid ourselves of this sin. Let's have Jesus cast out this demon so we can get on. But I love y'all, man. I hope y'all had a good time. Hope you enjoyed listening. Hit me up if you got anything. My email's down in the description. I'll say it like this. I ain't running from a tough conversation, man. Let's have it. Let's do it. And love y'all. Hope y'all doing good. Until next time, grace be.